Welcome back, once again, to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV. Today we're delving into the 2.3 content, looking at one of the new dungeons that's been given to us. The Stone Vigil, hard mode. Now, this dungeon has been added to the Expert Roulette, and the previous dungeons in the Expert Roulette have been removed. In fact, all three of the new dungeons are now in the Expert Roulette, and they are there by their lonesome. Of note is that the average item level required to run these dungeons, as well as the sheer difficulty of these dungeons, does make them a fair bit more difficult than the ones we've run up until now. Mechanically, they're not that hard, but they are much more demanding on gear. Stuff's got more HP, hits harder, the drill. Now, being one of the newer dungeons, at the very least at the moment, not a lot of people have run these, so for a while now you're going to almost guarantee to get somebody in your group that's never run this dungeon before. Personally, I have run this one before, as well as the healer. However, Ogre there, as well as Mary Jane Claypool, two people from our free company, have not run this dungeon before. Normally I would explain things to new players as we get to things that need explaining, but the healer actually decided to step up and do that, and did perhaps a better job than I would have on the fly. Now, at least up until the first boss, everything is fairly standard. You can see there's nothing in the room to the right, so we head to the room to the left. And by standard, I mean you're going to be encountering regular enemies, and you pretty much just tank them and beat them down. Nothing too terrible. There is the Storm Biased there, as well as two Shield Dragons. The Shield Dragons, despite being tinier, actually take quite the beating in order to take down. And since they take so long to take down, that's why I went for the Storm Biased. I don't know. I'm going to call them Biased. The Storm Biased first. I don't particularly know if any of them have any special attacks or buffs or debuffs that you need to worry about, but I haven't seen much. Once again, nothing in the empty room across the hall. Another Storm Biased here, as well as two more Shield Dragons. And once they're done, you can see down there in the field a rather large number of dragonfly hunters. Yes, dragonfly hunters. These are all actually very weak enemies. And there's a lot of them out there, so there's not much you can do but just pull all of them at once. But they can just be AoE'd down. There's so many of them, and they die easily enough. As before, I don't especially know if they do anything worthwhile, but I don't think they do too much. Now, however, another enemy that is roaming around in this area is the rather large wyvern you see right there. This guy takes a little more of a beating, and he can do things like breathe fire over a rather extensive area without much in the way of warning. So I'd suggest not standing in front of him, but otherwise he goes down easily enough. Now, if memory serves, many people will recognize this room as the room that you fought the first mini-boss in the original Stone Vigil. Now, moving forward, you see two Shield Dragons and another Wyvern. That Wyvern will actually drop down and attack all of you before you need to aggro the Shield Dragons. So you can, if you want, just go down far enough to spawn the Wyvern and then pull him back and kill him before going in after the Shield Dragons. The Wyvern is just the same as the previous one, though, other than his breathing fire every now and then. I don't especially think he does too much of note. And then there is the two Shield Dragons, which we've already fought. And that should for the most part, take us to our first boss. Now, the healer is going to take a moment to explain this fight to us, but I'll take a moment to explain it to all of you as well. The boss himself doesn't do too much of terrible note. However, he has a very, very large conal AoE that can hit everything in the room. What he will do is randomly he'll run off to the corners of the room, turn towards the room, and hit it to just hit everything in the room. So be sure if you see him running somewhere to follow very closely after him. And make sure you stay behind him. The only other thing of note is that a number of ads spawn during this fight, tiny little dragons. These dragons on their own don't do much, but once you kill them, they will do one of two AoEs, either a rather large conal AoE or a very large circular AoE. In turn, what you want to do is pull these away from everybody else. Point them towards away from everybody else, or point them towards the outside of the arena, and make sure they're far enough away that if they do the circular AoE, you don't have to worry about that hitting anyone. The trouble here is it's very, very difficult to actually get hate on them. The DPS are going to be handling them, but they have so little HP that you can only get a good 2-3 hits on before they just die. Especially with the healer healing everybody, it's going to be very difficult to actually get hate on them, so don't blame the DPS for not pointing them where they need to be or moving them where they need to be. Sometimes, and by that I should say most times, there's very little we can do about it. And in turn, really, just everybody make sure that you're prepared to dodge. So, of course, you can pull him off to one of the corners of the arena. In fact, I would suggest keeping him in one of the corners of the arena, if only to give a little more control over the ads. You saw the attack there was actually the rather large attack that will hit the entire room. He does use it on only the tank. These are the ads that are spawning. You could see I even went to stun that one, and he just kept on not caring. And trying to pull hate. Looks like MJ's got hate on that one, though, so just do that and then back on the boss. The first group of ads I have never seen use the circular AoE. I've only ever seen them use the conal. And I think as time goes on, they start using the circular AoE more and more often, to where by the end, I don't remember seeing the conal AoE much at all. And there you see him running off to one corner of the arena, so get the crap behind him. And then do what you can to pull hate on the Vigil helms here. Pointing him towards the outside of the arena, which didn't do me much good. I found that circular AoE, as large as it is, and it looks like you have very little time to get out of the way of it, but I feel like you have more time to get out of the way of it than you think you do. Because you see it disappear while I was still inside of it there. Of course, he's running off to the corner again, so I'm getting behind him. Now, especially while you're dealing with the ads, this is going to be more and more difficult to do. So try your best to keep an eye on him, but if you do get too distracted, you may end up eating one of his rather large attacks. It shouldn't be enough to kill you, but it'll hurt a bit. Yeah, trying to pull hate, didn't work. One more here that's now just going after the healer. Trying to pull hate. I think I finally managed to pull... Nope. And again, there's nothing we can do about that. He doesn't have the HP for us to be able to wail on it long enough to get hate. Maybe if we were all tanks, we could maybe manage something, but... honestly, that's about it for the fight, though. Just keep this up and keep wearing them down, and that should really about do it. Hoping this guy follows me here. And then they always do the circular AoE, when I finally manage to get them pulled out of the way. At least they're pulled far enough away that it's not... and there we go. Because I was dealing with the ads, I saw the boss run off in the background. I wasn't paying enough attention to the boss, and I got hit by the big attack. It didn't hit me too terribly hard, though, but I did get hit by it. I think I also got hit by the dragon's attack. Now, the small dragon's conal attack, I believe, is just pure damage. I'm not entirely sure what the big one is, because I swear I've been hit by it a good couple times, and I don't think I've taken too much in the way of damage. I don't think I've especially gained a debuff or anything to it either. So, all I can honestly say is just try to dodge it, because whatever it does, it's going to be bad. But there goes the first mini-boss, and now we can move on. Now, before we get to the second mini-boss, there is actually going to be a bit of fun involved. I think another interesting thing of note is that the drops in this dungeon are actually all item level 80, as well as crafting items. But all item level 80. I think it mentioned that the minimum item level requirement was 70? But that it even gives drops equivalent to Labyrinth of the Ancients, I think is kind of interesting. Now here we're starting to deal with some of the tainted people, and no longer purely dragons. These three don't do anything of note, but later groups we encounter will have something that we'll want to be paying attention to. These, however, fight simply like three regular people. See a number of dragons flying in from the side. These are simply more dragonfly hunters, so feel free to AoE of them down. And then coming up should be... ah, yes. Coming up is something we'll want to actually worry about. That dude there, marked with a number 1, Haranguing Harrier. Much like the one enemy in Amdapor Keep, as soon as you engage him, he will start casting a summoning spell. If this succeeds, he will summon a dragon to come in and fight alongside all of them. So of course you want to stun him out of it, you see it there. Dragon's Roar or some such. Now, something of note that makes him a little bit different from the dude in Amdapor Keep is that he will continue to cast it. After you stun it the first time, he'll wait just a second and then start casting it again. Honestly though, as long as everyone DPSs the one enemy down as fast as possible, you should only need to stun him maybe twice. And those are enough stuns that I can do on my own. Say, as soon as we engage, I can shoulder tackle in to stun him out of the initial one, and then wait for it to build up a little bit before I use Steel Peak to stun it the second time. And as long as we've got the DPS on him, he should go down after that. They don't have the most HP in the world. But here you see there's another one there off in the distance, second from the left. Or maybe it's the farthest one on the left. It's hard to read from here. Nope, farthest one on the left. So we're going to want to do the exact same with him. And once he's dead, though, the other two fight just like regular human characters. And that should nearly be enough to... Ah, yes. This dude here, the Jura Avis, I do believe, this is actually the dragon that the Harrier from before will summon. And he's a bit of work to deal with. You see, as you fight him, he will actually continuously use an ability that puts a vulnerability up debuff on everyone. You can see him charging it up right there. That ability is unstunnable and unsilenceable. I've tried both. So all you can really do is just kill him quickly to try to avoid it. And thus we encounter a rather large dragon flying about in the distance. There are also 3 cannons here, bringing the cannons back from the original Stone Vigil. The dragon flying about will shoot at you, and what you want to do then is simply use the cannon pointing at him to shoot him down. Hit him once, he'll go away, and summon a number of smaller dragons, such as the Dragonfly Hunters here. The Dragonfly Hunters actually come in from 2 different locations, so don't only focus on one side, because a bunch will be coming in from your flank as well. You can see there's 2 of them maybe here, and then a bunch that came in from the other side. And as soon as you kill them all, the big dragon comes back, shoot him again. This will repeat 2 or 3 times until a much larger dragon spawns. Right there in the middle. Specifically 2 Dragonfly Hunters and a rather large Wyvern once again. I think this is the same Wyvern from before. But this is the final bit. The dragon that was flying about off in the distance is now gone. I'm focusing on the Dragonfly Hunters here. Normally I would just rely on the other DPS to do some AoE and kill everything. But between me and a Dragoon, we don't have much in the way of AoE. But in killing all of them, you see another Jura Avis show up there in the distance. He's broken down the wall that was barring your path, so take him down now, remembering to kill him quickly because he's going to be putting that vulnerability up debuff on you. At least I think it's vulnerability up. I'm pretty sure it's vulnerability up. Or if it's not vulnerability up, perhaps it's a determination up buff he puts on himself. See a wall of fire blocking your path, however, we can turn to the right instead, and that takes us to our second boss. Now, in this arena, you will notice that there are 4 cannons in the 4 corners of the arena. Each one of you will be getting on one of those cannons, and you should almost never need to get off of it. The entire fight is done with cannons. So everybody claims a cannon, and the fight begins. The boss is first summoned, or first appears, in the middle of the arena. And he arrives with a boom. This will knock you back and knock you off your cannon, so be sure to run up and actually get back on it. And then just start shooting at him. You'll want to use the left of the 2 different cannon shots that you have, and just keep shooting him to do damage to him. When you see him do that attack, a pulse that hits the entire arena, you want to use the second ability. Your left one is purely for damage, your right one is a stun. Now when you see the green spheres, the shell appear around him, and now he's glowing red, do not shoot him. If you shoot him while that's active, your shot will be reflected back at you and hurt a fair bit. Also, while you're fighting him, add spawn. As soon as you see him light on fire like that, by the way, get off your cannon. I did a very bad job of it, but get off your cannon because he will oftentimes spin and spin towards you, and you'll have to get out of the way. I say get off your cannon because you have to mash escape enough times and take care of everything enough times that he'll usually be close enough to hit you, and you won't be able to dodge long enough if you wait too long. So just as soon as you see him start spinning, get off it. And get ready to run. Adds also spawn, as I'm sure you've seen. You simply use your cannon to power these down as well. Now, you can't shoot too close to yourself, so if any dragons come over, if any adds come over and start beating on you, you're going to have to rely on your two adjacent team members, or the one across if they can actually see, to shoot them off of you, as I am doing there. And then that just goes right back to shooting the boss once again. I would suggest focus targeting this boss. If only because that's a good way, or it's very difficult to know how much HP he has left. I think early on, perhaps your cannon actually has the boss targeted, but that seems to go away after a time, and you're just never really sure when the fight's going to end. Now, your right attack of the two did have a very, very long recast on it. So if he does the move that you need to stun 2 times very quickly after each other, you won't be able to stun the second one. What ideally, you would want to stagger your stuns with the other teammates, so there's always a stun available. But to be honest, you can live through the attack without too much trouble. All it is the attack that hit you at the very, very beginning of the entire fight that knocks you back, and then you have to run, get back on the cannon. It hurts a little bit, but if you have to get hit by it, no big deal. Having downed the second boss, we're now dealing with the regular adds before making our way to the final boss of the dungeon. And there are a number of dudes around that we'll want to worry ourselves with, such as another Jura Avis. In fact, we'll be seeing many more of these coming up soon. Another Jura Avis there. The Avises, I would say, should always be your priority because of the buff that they do. I'm not entirely sure what it does. Maybe it is a buff to them. But regardless, they should be your priority. Once they're done, worry about everything else. The other enemies here, I don't think I've seen do too much of terrible note. They just kind of take a little bit of a beating to take down, and I'm sure they hit hard enough. Moving on, there's yet another dead-end room. Instead, we want to go south. A bit of a stretch, but right here you'll see, backlit by the fire, another Jura Avis off in the distance. And then in this room, a couple more of the Turtuses. And the Jura Avis that we saw from before will actually wander into this room and wander back out. However, as long as you don't run to the far side of the room, you should be fine. Just killing these two before we move on. And of course the Jura Avis is there. I'm saying his name a lot, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. I'm probably not. Doesn't help I can barely read the text when I edit. Now if you can pull the Avis into this room to kill him, more power to you. Because if you go into this room just a little bit, another Wyvern will spawn. And promptly breathe fire over everyone. You have to kill this Wyvern before you can move on. And if you do run a little bit too close to this doorway, you're liable to spawn him and have to fight him at the same time as the Avis, which is going to be wonderful. Now with him defeated, you can see the room off to the left, which is actually not a dead-end room. There are 2 treasure coffers in here, and unlike as we suspected, they are actually both legit treasure coffers. And then for the final encounter, we actually have to fight 2 Avises, as well as that one Harrier that will summon another Avis. In turn, our priority, as usual, is to kill the one Harrier first, and prevent him from summoning anything. He should go down quick enough, just be sure to keep his ability stunned, and then focus on the 2 Avises and hope bad things don't happen. This'll be a little bit of a rough fight, but it shouldn't be too terrible. And the final one down unlocks a storage vault key, which is our key to the final boss of the encounter's chambers. You can see him there in the distance. This will be a slightly unorthodox fight, but overall still enjoyable. The most important thing to note is that he completely ignores hate. All hate. He wanders around and does his own attacks, and half the time when he does his attacks, he'll be pointing himself off in the distance, attacking nobody. Other times he'll wander specifically over to somebody and swing. This is going to be a fun fight because everybody has to be on the move and stay out of his way. He has frontal attacks and rear attacks, so you don't want to stand in front of him or behind him. His frontal attacks are also a degree of a cleave, so you'll want to not just stay strictly on his sides, but I try to stay on his sides, angled slightly behind him. But that's mostly the fight, and that's mostly what you're going to have to deal with. He's got a number of different attacks to worry about, and if you watch, he does have an animation prepping each one, such as a charge attack, where you see him actually ready up before charging. He's got a tail swipe, where you see him swing his tail to one side and hold it for a moment before swiping. And these are all things that you're going to want to keep an eye on. At the very beginning of the fight, paying attention to all of these animations may not actually be that important. Simply staying on his side and maybe to a slight angle behind him and moving with him carefully is really enough to be perfectly safe. So just continue to wail on him and continue to make sure that you move with him and stay on that side. You can see the animation where he actually readies the charge before he starts running. Most of his attacks do end up targeting one specific person, but you can constantly run out of the way, especially in the amount of time it takes him to prep the attack. So as long as you're on the move, it's not that bad. In fact, as long as you pay a lot of attention to him, you can fight him without getting hit at all. Oh, and by the way, yes, that is a second of him that just spawned off to the side. Remember how I said at the beginning, perhaps paying attention to the animations isn't that important as long as you stay on his correct position. What you want to do is pay attention to the second dragon. Make sure you're watching his animations. You can stay in the correct position to the dragon you're fighting, and you do of course want to kill this one dragon before tackling the second one. But just stay in position on the first one. Don't even worry about what attacks he's doing. Instead, pay attention to the second dragon and his animations to to tell where he's going, what he's going to do, and how he's facing. Also of note, every time you get hit by either of these bosses' attacks, you actually get a vulnerability up debuff put on you that does stack. It wears off after an amount of time, or perhaps can be a soon it off, I'm not honestly sure. But if you do get that effect on you, it does stack. And it stacks up to about 3, at which point you will simply be one-shot by any of his attacks. Now, as defensively as I'm playing, as much as I'm dancing around to try to not be hit by anything and keeping an eye on the second one, to make sure I try not to get hit by anything, this whole fight reminds me very much of my Dancing with Bams days. And it actually kind of makes me want to try to solo this boss. Once you've killed the first one, and only one remains, the fight gets infinitely easier, because once again, you're simply following him around, staying in correct position. If you do want to play super defensively, whenever he walks away from you, I would be sure to not just rush right in, because he could turn and breathe fire, as he did right there, hitting you when you had no real way of getting out of the way of it. But especially when there's only one of them left, it's not so big a deal. Just try to stay in position, keep following him, and he should be dead before not too long. Also, since there are 2 bosses, they effectively each have half the health of a proper boss. And in turn, your limit break does far more damage proportionally, should you choose to use it. So you can limit break the second one dead when he's still got a surprising amount of HP left. Of course, we completely forgot to do our limit break there, but what are you gonna do? So that is the Stone Vigil hard mode, newly added in 2.3. One of 3 new dungeons added. The gear requirements are a fair bit higher, but at the same time, it's not that mechanically complex. A fun dungeon. And until next time, everyone.